Welcome to Pod Revisited, episode 75. I'm Tori.
And I'm Shay.
Today we are covering chapter 15 of Goblet of Fire, Beauxbatons and Durmstrang.
Or, as we like to call it, crime is crime.
So the chapter opens up from the end of last chapter. Harry found out that Sirius was worried about him, and so he's going to come back into the country to keep an eye on him. Harry doesn't want that, so he writes Sirius this really funny reply being like, I imagined that whole thing, Sirius. Like, don't worry about it. My head's completely normal now.
I was just being so dramatic. He could lie better. He should have been like, I had just eaten an ice cream, and in hindsight, brain freeze. Like, lie better, Harry. Lie better.
It just very much shows Harry's kind of like hero complex where Sirius is the adult in this situation, but Harry is just like, I need to protect this grown man that technically should be protecting me.
I mean, it's very Gryffindor-y to it's very just good person to want to protect the ones you love, but it's very Gryffindor to I feel like all Gryffindors are like, no, I'll save you. No, I'll save you first. And they're like throwing each other aside to be the one that jumps into the fire to save the other person. Like, that's peak Gryffindor.
Yeah, you can see it happens a lot in the series.
Yeah. No, I'm saving you. No, I'm saving you. There's one hero pair of pants in every situation, and they punch each other out to get to wear the hero pants,
Yeah, well, we get a lot into the lessons in today's chapter, and Dumbledore apparently wants the students to know what the Imperius Curse feels like. And it just really feels like that's an excuse to test Harry on him handling the Imperius Curse.
Another day of other students suffering, so Dumbledore can test Harry. It's all about Harry.
And of course, Hermione's like the only voice of reason, being like, you just told us last lesson that this is illegal. Like, why are you gonna put the curse on us? And then Moody tells Hermione, like, oh, if you can leave if you want. And she's like, like he broke her for a second.
It's crazy that Moody/Crouch is allowed to do the Imperius Curse on children.
Yes. It feels weird also, we're doing it on children, but also the fact that they're in a class setting and doing it in front of their peers. I just feel at 14, you're so self-conscious, and he's making them do weird things. And I just feel like to have that happening in a class in front of your peers, even the last lesson we talked about, having it to do it in front of everyone.
I feel like, doing something that making the kids do embarrassing things is could be deeply traumatizing for those kids. But I kind of love that Moody/Crouch uses the Imperius Curse on Neville and has him do something cool. Like, everyone else is doing kind of embarrassing things, and Neville's doing backflips, and I'm like, of all the people who deserve to not have been embarrassed further in class and deserve to have done something cool in front of their peers, I'm so glad it's Neville. It's such a thing that you would think a nice teacher would do. If we're going to do something that might be a bit embarrassing, I'm going to give the cool role or the cool task to this kid who never gets to be the one that's cool and is always embarrassed in front of his peers in class. And this can be his moment to be the least embarrassing. And it's crazy that it's Barty Crouch, noted Death Eater and terrible person, doing that. Because I'm like, that's a good teacher behavior.
Like we said, he could have been a good teacher. He could have been a teacher in another life if he didn't choose a life of crime.
Definitely Joe's crime. And it really is quite sad because
it's pretty good with the kids.
He's very good to Neville. The only teacher who was good to Neville was actually a horrible person.
It's also kind of weird that he's so good to Neville, because we did talk about last episode about how he was the one that kind of tortured Neville's parents and, caused him this trauma of not being able to grow up with his parents.
I wonder if there's underlying guilt. I wonder if, out in front of his mind, he's probably I hate him and I hate everyone. But maybe deep down inside, he has a slight sensitivity to Neville. And he's like, this kid, I've hurt enough. I can hurt all these other kids because I've done nothing to them yet. But I've already damaged this kid. So I'm going to lighten the load of future trauma from me on him. Subconsciously. But I do like that Neville gets it easy and Neville gets to do something cool instead of embarrassing. But I really think if a teacher is doing this definitely illegal curse on the students, there should be some type of consent form that their parents have to sign, first of all.
Oh, yeah.
Liability. And also defining the terms of what type of acts he's allowed to make the students do. Because regardless, he's making them do something that is against their will. And it should be really defined as I will attempt to make each student do one of the following mildly weird but not traumatizing in any way actions. I'm only allowed to make them do those things. This contract is only valid for the time period of this class, this day, from this minute to this minute. Really specific contract from the hour of 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., the following students consenting to either stand on one foot and jump up and down, do a backflip, pick up and drop a pencil repeatedly, really defining the terms because it's really risky, really dangerous, and it's setting a weird precedent, I think. And that he just gets to choose off the top of his head what thing he makes them do under the Imperius Curse is risky.
Especially having one lesson where they see it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm always up for like defining like what you're going, like knowing what's the expectation before you are actually like kind of told to do it. Like the reason I didn't like the lesson with the Unforgivable Curse is that they went into that lesson not knowing what was going to happen.
Yeah. Very much like last episode, you brought up like frog dissections in science class in high school.
Yeah.
You know, like a week in advance, this is the day the class will be doing frog dissections. They like send a note home to your parents and they say like, there is an alternative. Let us know if you want to do the digital frog dissection. And I'm not like against dissections because science is important, but I really love frogs. So I opted out because I would have rather dissect not a frog because I love them so much.
I just think with us anxiety girlies that like having the choices or knowing beforehand takes like the anxiety out of it.
Yeah. And then like again, coming back to it, it's the Imperius Curse, the use of which will earn any wizard a one-way ticket to Azkaban, which was just established in the last chapter. So it kind of makes it seem like using the Imperius Curse is not a crime, but using the Imperius Curse to make someone do something awful is a crime. So like the Imperius Curse isn't the crime. Crime is the crime. Just like...
Yeah, they're really blurring the lines here. I don't know what Dumbledore's thinking. Well, Dumbledore's thinking of Harry.
It's like, it's not a crime if it's just for funsies or for learning. And like, at what point does for funsies cross over the line to being punishment or suffering or cruelty? Like, it's so undefined. And he's like, it's fine. It's just for fun. Like, it's still a crime, though.
Moody says that Dumbledore wanted him to teach the students this, or to use the curse on them. So obviously Dumbledore's like, you know what, Voldemort's doing stuff, so Harry needs to be prepared. But this is fake Moody. So fake Moody seeing how Harry is able to withstand the Imperius Curse.
Yeah, I think it's very, very interesting that he seems like genuinely interested. Like, oh, cool, Harry's doing a pretty good job of fighting this thing off instead of like notably being angry. Like, he doesn't even seem like thwarted. Like, some teachers would be annoyed that they're trying to prove no one without practice can throw this curse off, and one of the kids kind of threw it off. He'd be like at least annoyed by that. And this guy like actively wants Harry to be able to be cursed and killed. And he's just like, wow, that's pretty, like genuinely like, well, that's pretty impressive. I do sort of wonder if Harry has had some practice fighting off an unforgivable curse, in that he was attacked with the killing curse and didn't die. And even though that wasn't really on purpose, like he didn't actively do that, he has felt the sting of an unforgivable curse before. Like, I wonder if there's a part of him that can fight it off, or alternatively, the Horcrux, if there's part of Voldemort that could fight it off. And that piece has such a strong sense of self-preservation. It's like, no. You can't control me. I am Lord Voldemort. This is not safe.
But we are told in Deathly Hallows that Hermione does say that like that Horcruxes like really like they protect, the container protects it. So I feel like the Horcrux in Harry is anytime he's trying to be like injured, they're just like, nope. But something relatable is that they kind of go through the next few lessons and they're getting a lot more homework and a lot more expectations. And it just reminds me of just this being very relatable around like 14, 15, when you're kind of like starting, like for us, it would be like high school, and just like the expectations, especially like going into preparing for like if you wanted to go into university or college, and kind of like what classes you need to prioritize.
I even remember the tests.
Yeah.
Being harder. Like, I feel like in middle school and grade school, you didn't have exams, you had tests. So like you do 3 days of just one type of multiplication, and then you're tested on just that type of multiplication. And then you learn another, whatever, long division, and then you're tested on just long division. High school is the first time you have cumulative exams at midterms and at the end of the year, where you have to remember all of the things you learned from sometimes weeks ago.
But yeah, it feels like it's kind of like this book is the turning point in the series, but it's also like growing pains. Like they're not like, they're coming into like teenagers, and the expectations are growing up along with them. And that's why I kind of like this book, where it's just like a lot more new things are happening, and it just feels a bit more grown up than the first 3 books.
Yeah. And like finally, like they have more course variety now, sort of. There's later year courses, and there's the right to drop courses. And like I remember realizing that being really bad at math was going to limit my future in certain careers I was interested in, because I knew I couldn't get good enough math grades to do those things, you know? Like, and it's a tough time. The increased workload.
Yeah, I learned very early on that when I almost failed math in grade 10, which is maybe around the age Harry is now, that I was like, yeah, I'm not doing anything that requires me to have math credit.
Yeah, I really, really wanted to be a forensic scientist for a really long time. And then I learned how like important chemistry is in that, obviously. And a lot of chemistry is very mathy. And I was like, turns out I just like the idea of solving crimes. But that is not actually forensic science, and math is important, and I can't do it.
Yeah, as soon as they brought math into science, I was like, it's game over for me because I wasn't good at science and I wasn't good at math.
So yeah, all their classes are getting hard, and Snape has them learning to make antidotes, which I think is a valuable thing to know. And he is threatening that he will actually poison one of them before the end of the semester so that they work really hard and get good at anecdotes. And I will say, if he actually poisons one of them, that's awful, even though he will have his own anecdote on hand because he can't just kill the students. I'm sure Dumbledore's warned him about that once or twice. But, like, it is a pretty good motivator. You know what I mean? You're, like, half-assing class, you're joking with your friends in the back row, and then you realize, oh, one of us might get poisoned. Maybe I should pay attention. Like, if you don't actually poison the students, threatening to poison the students to get them to take the class seriously isn't, like, a bad idea.
It's not great. But I mean, Moody's actually cursing the students at this point, so I mean...
Yeah, so honestly, Snape's just threatening to.
I do find it interesting that Hagrid is also giving them work to do, which is funny because it's Hagrid, and we always talk about his role as a teacher. But he bullies Malfoy over the ferret incident because Malfoy is like refusing to like participate in class and like do what he's told. I'm like, is this too far or is it necessary?
Yeah, there's a limit to what it is. But I will say,
is it okay? I mean, it's okay for the kids to bring it up because, I mean, Malfoy deserves it. But I'm like, should a teacher be bringing it up? But then we also feel for Hagrid because Malfoy tried to get him, like, sacked last book.
Exactly. I kind of love that Hagrid brings it up because Malfoy walks all over Hagrid all the time and threatens Hagrid and makes Hagrid's life miserable. And, like, Hagrid's first moment where he's like, oh yeah, well, at least I didn't turn him into a ferret. Right? Remember when you were a ferret, Malfoy? It's the first time that Hagrid has something that's like accessible he can use against Malfoy like that. And also, we need to remember that Hagrid was expelled so young that there is an impact on his like maturity. And like, I think he can't help himself because all the students are bringing it up and Malfoy's such a jerk. And it's like, he forgets sometimes that he isn't one of the students.
Yeah, I think it's the only way he can control Malfoy at this point, because before this, he's just like, he can't really control Malfoy. He just kind of like, ignores him and, does his best. At some point, he needs to kind of like keep Malfoy in line to kind of keep his like role as a professor. Like, he needs the respect of the students, even though we see Hagrid more as like a friend than like an actual like teacher or authority figure.
And he often forgets and sees himself as a friend too, rather than a...
Yes.
Poor Hagrid. But also, I would make fun of Malfoy for being a ferret too.
Well, like we said, he kind of deserved it. It's like the one time he actually gets like, a cute like punishment for his like, actions.
I mean, Hermione did punch him in the face that one time. That felt pretty satisfying. This is the first time he's magically experienced justice. And it's very satisfying.
So I thought an interesting point when they're kind of bringing up the Triwizard Tournament and people who were entering. Cedric is brought up by Ernie, and Ron's not kind of into it, but Hermione kind of calls him out, being like, oh, you just don't like him because he beat us at Quidditch. And she talks about his qualifications as in, like, things that he is, like, a good student, a prefect, which mean a lot to Hermione.
Yeah.
But Ron's like, you only think he's, like, a good nominee because he's handsome. And he kind of brings up Lockhart. And it kind of shows, I think, what they admire at the opposite sex at this point in the series. Like, we know Hermione obviously even with Lockhart, like, obviously he was handsome, but she admired the things that she believed that he did.
Yeah.
So when you think about like Crumb or Cedric at this point, or even like Ron in the future, it's just like, I do think that she admires people's like intelligence and like their character.
Work ethic, yeah.
And it's not really like their physical attributes.
I mean, I'm sure she can look at someone and say they're handsome, but I think it wouldn't matter to her if they were handsome and didn't study.
But it's not like the be-all end-all to her. But I think Ron shows his immaturity where he's thinking just about like physical attributes. And we see that a lot in this book where he's noticing women and like noticing Fleur and stuff. And he's only seeing like the surface level. And I think it's more just like, it's kind of like his self-esteem thing.
Ron is often seeking out validation, external validation. Yeah. And the higher the social standing of the person who validates you, the more meaningful that validation feels. So if he wants validation from someone who's pretty, he wants validation from the prettiest person because you're definitely not ugly if the prettiest person is validating you. Just like if you think you're stupid and the smartest person is validating you, it means more. Hermione telling Neville he did good or answering a question or on a test would mean more than Seamus saying it. But if Hermione told him his joke was really funny, he would be confused. But if the twins told him his joke was really funny, it would be a bigger and more meaningful compliment because
Yeah, I just feel like this moment kind of leads into the I guess the tension that they have
Yeah.
around the Yule Ball, where Ron really wants like the prettiest girl on his arm to kind of show that he's like worth it, or kind of like elevate him, and it's not really about them as a person. And Hermione's really offended by that because I think at this point Hermione maybe knows that her feelings for Ron aren't 100% platonic, and she's kind of annoyed that he doesn't notice her.
I think at this point in the Ron and Hermione relationship, there's some of Ron's traits that Hermione likes a lot, but I think the version of Ron she makes in her head that is the version of Ron she would be in love with doesn't exist yet. Like, I think she's like, I could really love Ron if only Ron did the following things in her mind. And it's kind of like she might be in love with a version of Ron that sometimes she thinks about, but I think the version of Ron she sees is not that version.
I don't know if she 100% knows she likes Ron. I think the way she sees Harry and Ron are very different. And I think this book kind of shows her, like, when she's more offended that Ron doesn't ask her properly to the Yule Ball, but I don't think she would have cared if Harry didn't ask her properly. And I think it's kind of her realizing that, like, there's something about Ron that she sees differently than Harry. But I don't think she really realizes it's a crush.
I think she also definitely accepts Harry's flaws and mistakes easier. She's like, oh, well, Harry did that. It's just how it is. But when Ron does the same thing, it's like, Ron, why can't you do better? It's because, like, it's like she knows Ron. There's something about Ron that could be what she wants, but she doesn't know that yet. But she's still trying to make Ron work towards being that. With Harry, she's like, Harry just is Harry in the way he is. And, like, I don't need him to be something else because he'll always just be Harry to me. He's not going to be something else to me. But, like, without even knowing Ron might be something else to her one day, she's still trying to make him better. You know what I mean? She's still wishing that he would elevate himself in those ways that she wishes he were elevated.
Yeah, so I love little moments of, like, the way they are seeing each other, and just, like, the characters noticing the opposite sex and kind of like their expectations and like how they're growing up a bit more. The school's getting ready for the Triwizard Tournament and the delegation's coming, and Filch is just, in a mood because, he has to clean the whole castle. And I'd be really grumpy too if I had to clean it without magic, and there's these students that are like, walking around messing everything up.
Yeah, he already hates all the students and they're bringing more. He's like, we have enough of our own problems and you want to outsource other people's problems into my castle?
And it's not even like he has to do like a basic clean to keep the castle like running. He has to do like an extra clean because it's like companies coming over.
You have to show off.
Yeah.
You have to like put your fancy, like your good company clothes on and like sit in the nice living room and not in the family room. This is the good dishware. They're bringing out the good dishware. You know what I'm saying? The fine china, as it were.
But we get more of the classes, and kind of the teachers are a bit stressed about the delegations coming. Even like McGonagall kind of like picks on Neville a little bit because he transplants his ears onto a cactus or something. And I'm just, poor Neville, like he's just going through it for these 2 chapters where he's just being like told off by everyone.
The only teacher who isn't abusing Neville is a escaped convict who tortured his parents.
The bar's pretty low.
What a twist. The bar was so low.
But we also get more hints of Fred and George, and they are just like, up to something. We've seen them kind of whispering in the corners a little bit. We know that they're they are blackmailing Ludo Bagman, but Harry just thinks that they're talking about the Triwizard Tournament.
Yeah.
But they're a bit like, I guess short with Ron, because Ron's like, oh, hey, like, what are you guys up doing? And then they're like, leave us alone.
Mind your business.
And usually Fred and George are pretty, like, open.
You're an older sibling. Did you ever have phases in your life where you were doing whatever you were doing and your younger siblings came up and you're like, no, just like, this is not yours, go away?
Oh, yeah. I just think we usually see Fred and George pretty open with Ron and Harry, and this is the first time we see them pretty closed off.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of be like a little hint being like, because from what we know through Harry, we just think it's about the Triwizard Tournament, and they know that Harry and Ron are interested in that. So it's like being like, oh, why aren't they like sharing with the class?
I also think it's one of the first times, like Fred and George are, I guess they're 16. So they're kind of like, Harry and Ron are like starting to become teenagers, but they're not fully there yet. And the twins have like been teenagers for a while. I mean, they're almost what wizards consider to be adults. So I feel like this particular ruse they have going on is like a pretty adult thing. I'm not saying blackmailing schemes are appropriate for adults, but like it's more of an adult thing. Like they're blackmailing an adult. There's real money involved, literal crimes, government officials. It's like an adult situation. And even though Harry and Ron and Hermione get up to adult hijinks by almost getting themselves killed all the time, Fred and George are kind of like, no, this is an adult thing. Like you guys won't understand the complexities of blackmailing a government official, and you're too young to understand it. Let us do our crime.
They don't want Hermione to know either, because Hermione would definitely rat them out.
She would report Ludo Bagman too, though. She'd be like, Ludo Bagman engaged in malicious, intentional, monetary crimes involving minors.
We kind of segue into Hermione and her spew society, as Hermione's peeved off at Hogwarts of History for not saying anything about house elves and how they work at Hogwarts for free and are basically slaves.
It's such an evolution because for a long time, Hogwarts history was like her Bible. She was like, everything you need to know and all the things I hold true and dear and all the facts are in Hogwarts of history. And now she's finding out that, like, history is always written by the people who win or the people who end up in positions of power. And in this case, the position of power is held by the wizards, and therefore the plight of the house elves is completely excluded from the histories they write.
We get a little tidbit about Hermione with Spew and how Harry and Ron kind of just joined, because they had no choice.
Yep.
And to shut her up. And some people seem interested, but they don't really want to campaign. And Hermione doesn't really let that bother her. She's just like, full steam ahead. And I think I said that reading this as a kid, I was always kind of embarrassed by how, like, forceful she seemed and, like, wouldn't let things go. But growing up, like, being an adult now and all these social issues that we are now living with, I'm like, good for her to be, like, this young. And obviously this is an unpopular opinion and she doesn't care.
Yeah, and she's doing the work. She's putting in the work, and she's not letting herself be dismayed by the lack of enthusiasm from the people around her. And she's standing up for it, and she's not letting it go.
And we really do see, because, like, Fred and George, who we know who are, like, general moral good guys, are even saying, like, oh, Hermione, like, the house elves are happy, we've seen them. And it kind of gives it, like, oh, they seem happy, but Hermione does say in response, because they're brainwashed, and they probably are.
I do think it's interesting that what the twins bring up is they're like, have you been down to the kitchens and have you seen them? Because that's very interesting, because Hermione is very book heavy when it comes to research. She's like, someone's written about it. I want to hear what the professionals have to say about it. And, like, because she's so used to, like, secondary resources and, like, doing her research from the library, it's probably hasn't, like, struck her yet that, like, you can do primary research. If you're concerned about the status or the well-being of the house elves, you can read as many books as you want, but to really understand it, you should go see them. And, like, not that Fred and George are right and you should just think they're fine because the ones they saw seemed fine, but, like, it is still very valid that she should go and see them and, like, have an understanding of what it's actually like to be in the kitchen as a house elf.
It kind of reminds me of, like, the voluntourism of, like, kind of, like, third world countries where people with, like, who are, like, Christian or just people that want to help go and think that they're doing things to help, but really it kind of hinders the communities that they're helping, because no one asks the communities who are in need what they need to, like, do better. And it's kind of like, oh, I know what you need better than you do. And that's kind of like the one thing that Hermione has to learn when she's doing Spew, is that she has all the good intentions and she's doing the work, but she's not actually asking them, like, what do you need? Like, what is your opinion? Like, what, including them in it at all when it's about them.
Yeah. And again, just knowing, like, she's really against how they're treated. But in order to fully articulate her point, it's important that she actually gets an understanding of how they're treated. And, like, I don't think there's books at Hogwarts about how house elves are treated at Hogwarts. So, like, it's good that the twins brought up that, like, you can go and see them in the kitchens. And, like, even though they're doing it to say you should dismiss this whole cause, the point of going and seeing how they are and what they're up to is valid, really valid.
But this moment's kind of interrupted because Harry gets a reply from Sirius, which I think is just so serious. He's just like, nice try, Harry. I'm back in the country. I'm well hidden. I'm hanging around.
Don't worry about it. Nothing ever goes wrong.
And Harry does feel, like, reassured that Sirius is close, even though he's worried about him. He's like, it's nice to know that he has someone in his corner.
Yeah.
So if anything does happen, Sirius is there.
Now we have basically the main point of the chapter is basically the arrival of, Durmstrang and Beauxbatons.
The delegations are coming. Yeah, I love the demonstrations of the houses, how Beauxbatons is always just so French, and they come in this big powdered, like, carriage, and Madame Maxine is just so French. Like, she comes in, like, this silk black dress. She's all, like, hair slicked back, super stylish. and all the kids' like cloaks are all silk, and it just feels very
expensive and luxury. I think like the way that it's described, like the blue of the carriage, to me is like a box from Tiffany's. Like it's the jewelry. They are gems getting out of their Tiffany's box, and they are shiny and they are expensive and they are fancy.
It kind of reminds me of like Versailles, because like they look at the castle and they're kind of disappointed, but when Durmstrang comes, they're kind of like, "Oh, this is cool." So I always imagine them as like they don't really live in a castle; they live in a palace. Is like their school, and it's just like it just brings into the stereotypes. It's just like the French are like fashion forward and stylish, and everything looks beautiful, and everything's just like bejeweled.
They be bejeweled is what they be.
I love seeing Madame Maxime, and she's just such a character.
I really love that the headmaster of one of the main big wizarding schools is a woman, because I love women in positions of power. But I think they sort of take away from that when in the films they make Beauxbatons a female-only school.
Yes.
Because I think that it's more meaningful for like kids and readers to be like, oh, this woman in position of power, despite the fact that there are male teachers and male students there, like she earned that position over everyone, not just over other women. Like I think especially in book that sometimes teeters a bit towards gender norms, it meant a lot to have someone in that position of power who was a woman. And the films sort of take that away. And it kind of feels less validating for Fleur as well, because the only Triwizard champion who's chosen that's a woman is Fleur. And they're like, oh, but she only won because there were no males available for us to have chosen. It's kind of how it feels like. She's the token girl from the token girl school, as opposed to like she's actually very talented magically. She's really good at what she does. And she was better than everyone in that school, all the boys, all the girls. And like I think young kids need to see the women who are being powerful, not just for a woman, but for a wizard at all, period. And I think the duality of separating the two visiting schools by gender takes that away. And like I understand kids are young and in their mind they're like, oh, we'll have one school just be boys and one school just be girls, so it's easier to tell the difference for the viewers. But I'm like, the girls are in little powdered, like the Beauxbatons still in like blue silk. You can have boys in blue silk and we'll know they're not Hogwarts students. Like there are other visual cues besides gender.
I think they wanted to play with, because like the UK I'm sure has like girls' schools and boys' schools because it's all very old. I feel like they wanted to play with like, Hogwarts is a co-ed school, and then Durmstrang's is all boys' school with like this uniform, and then the all-girls school is an all-girls school with this uniform, and they were kind of playing with like the different kind of school vibes. But I feel like the Wizarding world is very co-ed, like even Quidditch is co-ed, and I feel like it takes away from like the students and everything about it, having them all separated.
Yeah, and I also think like they have the school, like they chose it based on the gender of the champions, I guess, but like I feel like it was good to have a school like Beauxbaton where the uniforms are described as being kind of fancy and classy and silky and light, and like knowing that the boys wear that uniform because it's totally fine to be a boy who wants to wear something silky. And then the Durmstrang uniforms sound like rugged and thick and tactile and like practical. And like to me, why are the boys in the practical, ugly, gruff outfits and the girls in the cute little silk ones? Like boys can wear cute silk outfits.
It definitely plays into gender norms.
Girls can wear big, gruff, fur-lined cloaks if they want to. Like it's very gender normative, and just in the same way as reflecting gender norms, it's devaluing the women in this chapter by doing it. And it makes me mad, so the film shouldn't have done it, and I think it's stupid.
So unlike the entrances in the movie, the Durmstrang crowd comes in through a ship that, like, I guess it's like kind of a ship/submarine, but, magic.
I mean, it's just an underwater ship. It's I guess technically submarine, but in my mind, they weren't like it was just a portal through the lake. You know what I mean? They didn't spend a lot of time underwater, I don't think. I don't even know if they were like had to wear like magic bubble over the ship. I think it just like directly portaled from water to water. There wasn't a lot of time where they were like not allowed to be on the deck, We
also meet Karkaroff, who is the headmaster of Durmstrang, and we get some interesting vibes from him compared to Madame Maxime, who just seems very like we get good vibes from her, I feel.
Yeah, she seems like authoritative but not scary. Like her height is implied to be a bit intimidating, and she's intimidating from that perspective, but in like a good way. Like when you meet someone who's really, really good at something, you're intimidated but not scared. And I feel like Karkaroff gives off sinister vibes.
He feels like a slimy kind of vibe.
It almost looks like they cast him to look like the way they animate Rasputin in the animated film Anastasia.
see that now. Oh my god.
Right, though? Doesn't he give off Rasputin vibes?
But yeah, he's all very much like, yellow teeth. Harry notices he has a weak chin, which I think is really funny to notice.
He's not handsome. They just wanted us to know he's not handsome. Like when they told us Bill was handsome, they meant it. When they said Karkaroff had a weak chin, they mean he's not handsome.
You can just see the way he talks to Dumbledore too. Like he's very kind of like slimy and like trying to like kiss up. But the biggest shock at the end of the chapter is the fact that Victor Crumb is here at Hogwarts and Ron is...
That was my fangirl squeal. Not for me personally, but for the people who are... Ron. It was for Ron. That's what Ron's going through right now.
Because Ron's having a fanboy moment. He's like, oh my god, Harry, Victor Crumb is here.
I feel like I under-freak out about it. And I feel like now, as a person who loves sports, and like trying to imagine like going to work... I'm not in school anymore, so I don't go to school. But like going into work and having like Connor McDavid walk in, I would be like, what? You're expecting me to get my work done.
Yeah, this chapter is basically why are they doing curses on kids without parental permission?
And dramatic entrances. It was basically a whole chapter of like dramatic entrances.
Love Sirius coming into play.
I love that.
Also love just like the little hints of the kids growing up and being a bit more mature and experiencing teenage angst and crushes and all of it. Very excited to get more Crumb action as Ron's
Oh yeah, you're a Crumb girly, aren't you?
I was very into Crumb first readings as a kid. It's cool.
I was so into Snape I couldn't see past.
Hermione and Crumb, cool. I was very into it as a kid. I think I just liked that Ron was jealous, even though I didn't know he was jealous reading it like when I was a kid because I was 10. But I'm like, Ron's acting so funny.
So you weren't even into Crumb, you were into how Crumb made Ron be.
I told you, I am a Ron and Hermione girly for life.
As you should be.
Number one Ron Hermione fan. But yeah, thank you for listening to this episode of Potter Revisited. And we'll be back next time to discuss Chapter 16 of Goblet of Fire. The Goblet of Fire.
Oh, nice. Self-titled.
We made it. We've made it. If you have any questions you'd like us to answer, you can email us at potterrevisitedpodcast@gmail.com or reach out to us on social media at Potter Revisited, and we will see you next time.
Bye.